And the current theory of SHBG is someone can have a high SHBG and people say, oh, that's robbing all your free T. You need to get that SHBG down, and then you'll have higher free T. And my theory will conclude that that's not the case. If we just start by looking at the blood, so we're omitting SHBG for the moment, just looking at the blood and the free hormones circulating in the blood. To say that the bulls start to pump in testosterone. Now this testosterone has a high concentration gradient with both 5-alpha reductase and aromatase. Has a high concentration gradient from T to DHT and T to estrogen, until this concentration gradient comes to some level point, and that's dependent on how active your aromatase is and how active your 5-alpha reductase is, how much you have in your system. And eventually it reaches some equilibrium where you have some amount of testosterone. I think a fraction is converted to DHT and a fraction is also converted to estrogen. And all three of those hormones are also being broken down at a fixed rate, which is probably proportional to how much is in there. Say maybe 10% is broken down by the body every day, something like that. I don't know what it is. So your body's pumping in 10% of your current total, probably, something like that, and your body's removing 10% of your total. Therefore, you're in some equilibrium with all three DHT, T, and estrogen are all in equilibrium in your blood. Now let's introduce SHBG and see what happens. So say your liver starts pumping out SHBG molecules, and your SHBG starts rising. Now SHBG has a high affinity to these free hormones, so it's going to start sucking them up. It's going to start sucking up DHT, and we know it has a higher binding affinity to DHT, so it's going to suck up more DHT relative to T and relative to estrogen. So temporarily, while your SHBG is rising, you will have in your free hormones a temporary shift towards estrogens, and your DHT will temporarily be lower, and your T will temporarily be a bit lower. Your estrogen will also be lower, but less relative to your DHT. So you'll temporarily probably feel a bit crappy because it's being sucked up by the SHBG. So when SHBG is rising, you kind of feel worse, kind of less aggressive behavior, less DHT, maybe you're a little bit depressed. And we know from our experience with when SHBG is high, we know that it's high if you're keto, if you're vegan, if you're kind of going through a period of stress, like you're not getting, if you're keto, no carbs, your body's like, oh, like we're in a bad state, you know, we're almost starving here. We don't want to be acting like an alpha male right now. So once SHBG stops rising, the natural equilibrium of T to DHT will temporarily be shifted because your DHT will be lower than your T. The conversion of T to estrogen will be temporarily reduced because estrogen's higher than it should be. And that concentration gradient has almost gone the other way. So estrogen will be broken down at a higher rate. It will be, say, that 10% per day or something. Until eventually your free T, your free hormones return to that equilibrium again that they were at before SHBG was involved. Now SHBG, they're all tightly bound. The hormones are all tightly bound to it. It's sitting there, extremely tightly bound. It's literally doing nothing. It's like a reservoir of free hormones sitting bound to that SHBG, and perhaps it has some interaction with cells, and it's that complex, that SHBG T complex, and it's thought to have some function in cells, but I imagine that's minor, and studies kind of indicate it's minor, that free T is the thing that correlates with mood and most of muscle gain, stuff like that. So it's extremely tightly bound, and if it's tightly bound, you can almost ignore it. It's not, no free hormones are coming off, no free hormones are going in. SHBG is not being broken down. If it is being broken down, it's being replaced at exactly the same rate it's being broken down, and those free hormones that were released when the SHBG is broken down will immediately be sucked back up into the SHBG. So it's in equilibrium. You can ignore this SHBG and just look at the free hormones, which will return to their own equilibrium if nothing's changing about them. Just with these concentration gradients and the rate they're being broken down, it will eventually return to the normal level of T, the normal level of DHT, and the normal level of estrogen that we saw when SHBG wasn't involved at all. Now let's say the body the person comes into contact with carbs, huge amount of carbs, big spike of insulin. And we know insulin is one of the drivers to low SHBG, and it's thought that that's because when there's plentiful energy, tons of calories, times are good, you want to then be behaving like a stud. You want to be then being more aggressive, confident, higher sex drive, stuff like that. So we know then SHBG will drop in the presence of insulin. Now we know that when SHBG goes up, it sucks up free hormones, and it sucks up more DHT, more of the kind of aggression ones, relative to the others, T and estrogen. Now the opposite will be true when it goes down. It will release way more DHTs, release a good amount of T and less estrogen. So you're temporarily, as it's dropping, you'll have a spike in your free hormones that will push you towards androgens, it will push you towards DHT. So you'll have that kind of aggressive behavior, and so it's almost this big reservoir that's sitting in your blood, and when it needs it, your body needed a way. When we were evolving, your body needed a way of changing your behavior with your hormones, depending on the situation you're in, and it's probably more difficult in the body to change the rate of expression of 5-alpha reductase and of aromatase. I mean, is that possible? Maybe you quickly produce more aromatase. Quickly produce more 5-alpha reductase, and then hope you're getting a higher conversion to DHT, or maybe pump out more T with the bulls. But I mean, it seems less practical than having a big reservoir sitting there of free hormones, especially given that reservoir, when utilized, will have a higher amount of the kind of masculine alpha male aggression hormones relative to the others. And when SHBG is finished dropping, then these free hormones will then return to their equilibrium again, because you'll have a higher amount of DHT in there than you should. So that's being broken down at, say, 10% a day. Eventually that will return back to its baseline amount, and testosterone will be converting less to DHT because of that concentration gradient. I imagine on the other side of the conversion of T to DHT, the DHT inhibits that conversion, because there's tons. It's like trying to push something across when there's already tons of DHT in there. It's probably reduced that conversion. So that's why I imagine it returns to baseline. What this means is that the current theories seem to think that SHBG, it kind of regulates your free hormone levels. So I've seen some studies that say if you have high SHBG, your free hormone levels will be pushed way towards estrogen, and the same is true for the opposite. And that's not seen in practice. You don't see guys with high SHBG like with super high estrogen, like free estrogen, that is. They feel fine. I mean, our ratios of free hormones are determined by the conversion, the rate of conversion from T to DHT and estrogen. And people seem to think that if you have high SHBG, it's sucking away all your free hormones. A guy might have low free T and really high SHBG. One, they get diagnosed as, your testosterone's fine. You're fine, mate. You got great T. When realistically, their balls are pumping out enough to keep their free T at that low level. SHBG, you ignore it. It's a big fat reservoir sitting there. You ignore that. And the current guys are saying, your SHBG is sucking it all up. It's not. Your SHBG is tightly bound to its current hormones, and it's floating around and is doing nothing until it's broken down or until it's increased. So you can try lowering your SHBG, but we've seen it before, like anecdotally, and I have no evidence of this, but anecdotally, your free T will remain the same. It will temporarily increase while your SHBG is dropping, but if you then wait for your free hormones to hit some equilibrium again, your free T will be the same as before. Another consequence of this theory is that total T has absolutely no bearing on diagnostic criteria. Total T is a combination of 99% SHBG bound and a little bit of free hormones. So you look at total T, and it's like, oh yeah, your total T is quite high. You're just looking at SHBG, like that's all you can really see. If you want to look at ball production, how much you're actually making, you look at free T, because that's the thing that's in that equilibrium. That the more your balls produce, your free level of T will increase, but that's getting broken down at a set fraction per day. So your balls need to produce a larger amount to sustain that higher level of free hormones. The conclusions here are that SHBG does nothing to regulate your free hormones unless it's changing, and total T is a totally useless tool for diagnostic criteria for low T. And lowering SHBG does nothing, increasing it does nothing. People are concerned about SHBG. I mean, does SHBG exist to transport free hormones around the body? I mean, I doubt it. Like, so say you're a guy on TRT, and you have this testosterone cypionate or enanthate circulating through your body, and it passes through the liver, and it's this testosterone is cleaved from the enanthate part and is then circulating freely in the blood. Now, if the idea of SHBG is to act as a transport molecule around the body, that would mean that, I mean, by the time the free hormones get from my liver to the rest of my body, it will be broken down, it'll be gone, and we need SHBG to transport it around. Now, I don't think that's the case, because I mean, one, free hormones probably aren't broken down that fast, and two, it would mean that when I get a blood test, by the time my blood's got from my liver to my arm, there's no free hormones left in it. I mean, you'd see that with guys in low SHBG, just no free hormones, and we don't. And also, we would see if SHBG had such a huge impact on free hormone levels when it's unchanging, we would see guys needing huge variations in dose. We'd see guys with low SHBG needing tiny little dose, say 50 milligrams. I mean, that's small in my eyes. And we'd need guys with high SHBG having a higher dose. But that is not the case. I mean, I'm pretty sure that's not the case. I don't actually know. But we see very little variability in dose. The idea being that an input of testosterone will be equal to some excretion rate, and SHBG has nothing to do with that.